quiet carpenter, a widow, pregnant, and without a roof over her head, Marisol returned to the only man who had truly loved her, not knowing whether he would take her in or throw her out like everyone else. The people of the town believed they knew what that man would do with a woman who left him standing years before to marry another. They almost never get it right. This is the story of how a quiet man, whom everyone took for nothing much, surprised a whole town the day he opened his door to the woman who once rejected him. Welcome. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and comment from which part of Mexico or of the world you're joining us. Marisol walked 3 days along the dirt track of the plains of Zacatecas with a small chest in one hand, the other over her belly of 6 months, and the dust of the road stuck to her eyelashes. She was 28 years old and had the face of someone who has cried all she had to cry and has no tears left. Behind her she left the house of her in-laws, who had thrown her out the same day they buried her husband, telling her that the child she was expecting was not their problem and that she should go back the way she had come. Her husband, Rutilo, had died of fevers in the winter, leaving her with nothing, because the house and the lands belonged to his parents, and his parents had never loved her. She kept vigil over him 2 whole nights alone, because Rutilo's family barely showed up at the wake. And the same day of the burial, before the earth of the grave was dry, the mother-in-law set her chest in front of her. "You married our son out of self-interest," Doa Burguita told her, while she threw the chest into the muddy patio. "Now manage on your own, you and that child of yours. Here there's no room for hangers-on." Her brothers-in-law looked at the ground. None of them defended her. The old servant Doa Pancha was the only one who slipped into the chest, in secret, some tortillas and a little cheese, and whispered, "May God carry you well, child. What they're doing to you isn't Christian." Marisol didn't beg. She picked up her chest from the mud, wiped her face with the rebozo, put a hand on her belly, and went off walking without looking back. Her head held high, though inside the world was falling on her. She had only one place to go, a name she had spent years avoiding pronouncing, even in her thoughts. Sal. Sal Carranza was the man Marisol should have married when she was young. A quiet boy, with big hands and few words, who had loved her with a calm devotion since they were children playing together at the edge of the stream. Sal was never one for grand promises or pretty words. His thing was being there. Bringing her water when it was hot, waiting for her outside Mass, mending in silence the broken fence of her father's corral without anyone asking him. He proposed marriage to her at 19, with a simple ring he himself had carved from bone, because he couldn't afford one of gold. But around those same days Rutilo appeared, a better family, a better silver tongue, with his fine hat and his promises of a comfortable life and a big house. And Marisol, young and dazzled, chose Rutilo. She told Sal no in front of half the town in the middle of the patron saint's festival, without measuring the harm. Sal made no scene. He didn't protest. He only hung his head, wished her luck with a broken voice, put the bone ring in his pocket, and from that day became even quieter than he already was, as if something inside him had been switched off. 9 years later, Marisol returned, a widow, pregnant, with nothing, to ask for help, her face full of shame, from the only man whose heart she had broken in public. Sal lived on the outskirts of the town, in a house inherited from his mother, small but well cared for, with a corral, some goats, and a shed at the back that always had its door closed. People took him for a poor devil, single in his 30s, without large lands, without a name, living alone since he had been widowed very young of a girl who died a year into their marriage. Poor Sal, they said, He was left on the shelf. No one bore him ill will, but no one took him into account either. He was, to the town, a man of little consequence. When Marisol reached his gate, at dusk of the third day, almost without strength, Sal was feeding the goats. He saw her. He dropped the bucket. And for a moment, the two of them stayed looking at each other in silence, with 9 years of distance between them. "Sal," said Marisol, and her voice broke. "I have nowhere to go. I understand if you close the door on me. But I didn't know who else to turn to. The whole town, had it seen, would have expected Sal to remind her of her scorn, to humiliate her, to collect on the old slight. That would have been natural. That was what Marisol herself expected, shrunken, ready for the blow. But Sal did none of that. He walked over to her, took the chest from her hand carefully, looked at her belly, and said, in that voice of his a few words, "You arrived just in time for supper. Come in. It's cold, and it's no good for the child." And nothing more. Not a reproach. Not a question about Rudolo, about the pregnancy, about why she came back just now and not before. He opened the door of his house to her as if he had been waiting for her the whole 9 years, as if there had never been a slight at a festival, as if time and pain didn't count in front of a tired woman who needed a roof. Marisol went in, and crossing the threshold she felt her knees go weak, not from exhaustion, but from not being used to being treated with kindness. That night, Marisol slept in the only bed, Sal's, while he settled on a mat by the fire. And he wouldn't accept it being any other way, no matter how she protested. Marisol cried in silence, hugging a mended blanket that smelled of firewood and of clean, not from sadness this time, but from something she couldn't name. Something resembling finally arriving home after a long time lost on the wrong road. The next morning, Marisol woke to the smell of clay pot coffee and freshly made tortillas. Sal had already milked the goats, already swept the patio, and had her breakfast served on the table, without fuss. He treated her with a quiet delicacy, the way one treats something one knows to be fragile. He didn't ask her about Rutolo. He didn't ask why they had thrown her out. He didn't ask her for explanations of anything. He simply let her stay. So the days began. Marisol, who wasn't lazy, began to help with what she could. She cooked, mended, tended the hens, swept the patio, though Sal told her to rest, that she wasn't of an age or in a state to go about bustling around. Each morning the same quiet rite repeated. Sal milked before daybreak, left the warm milk on the table, and when Marisol woke there was already clay pot coffee steaming in the clay jug. They ate in silence, but it was a good silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. Sal went out early with his mule loaded with who knew what, came back at midday, ate gratefully whatever she put in front of him, and in the afternoons locked himself in the shed at the back, the one that always had its door padlocked. Marisol didn't ask what he did there. She thought it would be tools, firewood, men's things, and she was embarrassed to meddle in what wasn't hers, already eating the bread of a man to whom she owed so much. The town, meanwhile, began to murmur, because in small towns the tongue is what walks fastest. That Rudolo's widow had moved in to live with poor Sal. That what nerve, pregnant, by another man, that Sal was an utter fool for taking in the one who scorned him. Doa Brigida, the mother-in-law, when she found out, let out a laugh of scorn in the middle of the market. Those two poor devils deserve each other. Let them starve together. See if that teaches them. Marisol heard the gossip when she went down to the town for the errands, and she lowered her head and quickened her pace. Sal, when he heard it, said nothing. He only clenched his jaw a little, pulled down his hat, and went on his way without giving them the satisfaction of a reply. One afternoon, Marisol could no longer bear the curiosity nor the guilt of eating the bread of a man whose work she didn't understand. She had spent weeks watching him lock himself in that shed each afternoon, hearing from the house a soft, rhythmic tapping, like that of someone caressing the wood more than striking it, and sometimes a low singing, almost a murmur, that Sal didn't sing anywhere else. It gnawed at her not to know. She thought many things. She thought even, ashamed to think it, that maybe the man kept some ugly secret there, because life had taught her to distrust even kindness. But more than the fear, the tenderness of wanting to truly know that man who had taken her in without asking for an accounting won out. When Sal went to the town with his mule, one afternoon of overcast sky, Marisol approached the shed at the back, her heart pounding. The door, for the first time in all those weeks, was without a padlock, ajar, as if fate wanted her to go in. She pushed it slowly, holding her breath. And then, Marisol saw something that made her drop the blanket she was carrying in her hands. The shed wasn't full of tools or firewood. It was full of furniture, but not just any furniture. Chairs carved with flowers and birds that seemed about to take flight, chests worked with a delicacy she had never seen even in rich houses, a dining table with legs turned like church columns, a wardrobe with crescent moon mirrors and garlands of leaves carved on the front. Mesquite and cedar wood, worked with an art that took the breath away, smelling of fresh shavings and varnish. Everywhere there were gouges, chisels, and planes arranged with the care of someone who loves their tools. In a corner, bathed by the light coming through a crack, half finished, was a cradle of pale wood, carved with a care visible from afar, with hearts and doves on the headboard. A cradle for a baby. For her baby. Marisol was left breathless, her hand on her mouth. Sal, the man the whole town took for nothing much, for a starveling who was left on the shelf, was an artist, a cabinet maker of a talent not seen in the whole region or for many leagues around. And he was carving, in secret at night, a cradle for the child she was expecting by another man, without having said a single word, without expecting anything in return. On the workbench, Marisol found also a bundle of papers tied with a cord. They were letters from merchants of Zacatecas, of Aguascalientes, and even of the capital, requesting furniture from him, ordering wardrobes and complete dining sets, offering him for his work sums she didn't believe possible, sums with which anyone would live comfortably the rest of their life. And among the letters, a framed award from a regional crafts fair of some years before, awarding the best work in wood of the region to one Sal Carranza. The man everyone believed a poor devil was, in absolute silence, the best cabinet maker of those lands, and had carved out a name and a fortune that he never flaunted before anyone. That night, during supper, Marisol couldn't keep quiet. "I went into the shed, Sal. Forgive me. I saw your work. I saw the cradle." Sal set down the spoon slowly. He didn't get angry, but he lowered his gaze like a child caught. "I didn't want the town to know," he said at last. "If they know I'm doing well, they come to ask, to envy, to collect what they're not owed. I prefer they believe me poor and leave me in peace. I send the work far away where they don't know me. Here I just want to live quietly." "And the cradle?" asked Marisol, with a knot in her throat. "Why are you carving a cradle for a child that isn't yours?" Sal looked at her then, with those eyes of his of few words, but much depth. "Because it's going to be born in my house," he said, simple, "and every child who is born in a house deserves a cradle made with love. It doesn't matter whose child it is. It's going to be, if you let me, a child of this house." Marisol covered her face and wept. She wept for the 9 lost years, for having chosen the empty promises instead of the quiet devotion, for not having known how to see, at dazzled 19, what she had had in front of her all along. She wept because the man the whole town scorned was more of a man, more whole, and more good than all those who had humiliated her put together. And she wept, above all, from relief, because for the first time since she was widowed she felt that her daughter was going to be born in a safe place, under the roof of good people. Sale said no more. He got up, gathered her plate along with his, and put his hand for an instant on her shoulder as he passed, barely a brush, before returning to his usual silence. The weeks passed, and Marisol's belly grew. Sal, without her asking, went on fixing up the house for the baby. But the peace lasted little, because the past always comes back to knock on the door. One morning Doa Brigida arrived, the mother-in-law, with a man from the city, a lawyer in a dark suit and a gold watch chain, and 2 of her sons. They arrived at Sal's gate with bad manners, banging the gate like owners. It turned out Doa Brigida had found out, through one of those merchants who came and went, that poor Sal was not at all as poor as the town believed. And suddenly, miraculously, a tender interest had been born in her for the grandchild she had thrown into the muddy patio just months before. "Marisol," said Doa Brigida, with a honeyed, false voice that made one cringe. "I've come to recover my grandchild. That child is a Rendon, carries the blood of my son Rutilo, may he rest in peace, and is not going to be raised in misery with a nobody. Here is the lawyer, who has already explained everything to me. We're going to take the child as soon as it's born. Whether you like it or not, a mother alone, without a husband and without a peso, has nothing to fight that with before the law." Marisol felt the floor open beneath her feet and brought both hands to her belly, as if protecting the child from the mere sound of those words. Sal, who was splitting firewood beside the corral, left the axe stuck in the trunk and approached slowly, without hurry, wiping his hands on his pants. And you, starveling, Doa Brigida shot at him, looking him up and down with scorn. "Don't get into family quarrels. With what do you plan to support this woman and another man's child? With your 4 scrawny goats and this hovel." The town, again, would have expected Sale to shrink, to hang his head as all his life, to step aside. And again, Sal surprised all those who were beginning to gather on the road to watch. "Lawyer," said Sal, with the calm of an old oak, never raising his voice. "Before we talk about the child, let's talk about the law, which you know better than I do. This woman is a widow. She is free, and she is mistress of herself and of her child. The child she expects is hers, no one else's, as long as she lives and wants to raise it. And no one, neither a grandmother nor a judge, can take a child from a healthy mother who loves it and can give it a roof. If you want to fight it in a court, we'll fight it. I have the means to pay the best lawyers of Zacatecas, and even of the capital if necessary. And I have, besides, half the town willing to declare under oath how they threw this girl into the mud of the patio the same day they were burying her husband. Let's see how that sits with a judge." The lawyer, who hadn't the slightest idea of Sale's fortune, and who had come believing he would easily win a case against a poor, helpless widow, looked at Doa Brigida disconcerted, beginning to suspect they had gotten him into a matter different from the one painted for him. Doa Brigida went pale. "What money is this wretch talking about?" she stammered, suddenly losing the honeyed voice. It was then that one of the merchants from the city, who had come following Doa Brigida in the hope of finally closing a deal with the elusive Master Carranza, took a step forward and spoke clearly, so everyone would hear, "Señora, with all respect, this wretch, as you call him, is Master Sale Carranza. His furniture is in the best houses of Zacatecas, of Aguascalientes and of the capital. This man has more name, more trade, and more money than your whole family put together. The only thing is that he doesn't like to flaunt it, a rare thing in these times. A silence fell over the patio like a slab of stone. Doa Brigida looked at Sal, looked at the shed at the back, looked at the faces of the neighbors who were watching her, and understood, too late, that she had come to scorn and to rob a man who was worth 10 times more than her and all her kin. Her 2 sons, who had very bravely accompanied her to take the child from a widow, took a step back, red with shame. The lawyer, without a word, began to put his papers away in his briefcase. "Go, Doa Brigida," said Marisol, standing up beside Sale with a new dignity. "You threw me into the mud when I had nothing. Don't come now to pick up what you scorned. My child is going to have a home, and it's going to have a father, God willing, better than the one blood would have given it." Doa Brigida found nothing to say. She climbed into her cart and left, pursued by the gazes of the neighbors who had been gathering on the road, those same ones who now looked at Sal with different eyes. It wasn't jail or scandal that defeated her. It was the shame of having scorned the one who was worth something, in front of the whole town that now knew it. When spring came, the girl was born. Marisol brought her into the world in Sale's house, an early morning of fine rain, with the town midwife, and with Sal waiting in the corridor, pacing like a first-time father, praying in a low voice to a plaster virgin that had been his mother's. When it was all over and they put the girl in her arms, Sal, the man of few words, couldn't say any. He only wept in silence, those big, quiet tears of men who almost never cry, and laid the child, with his enormous, trembling hands, in the wooden cradle he had carved with hearts and doves. The girl fit in it as if the cradle had been waiting for her always. They named her Remedios. And that house on the outskirts of the town, which everyone believed the house of a poor devil, filled with the laughter of a girl, the smell of fresh-baked bread, and freshly worked wood. Sal no longer hid his trade so much. He put a modest sign at the gate, and orders began to arrive from near and far. And with the orders, little by little, came also the respect of the same town that had so disdained him. Those who before called him poor devil now took off their hats as they passed, and called him master. Marisol learned to sand and to varnish, and the 2 of them worked together in the shed that never again had a padlock, while the cradle rocked nearby, within reach. Doa Pancha, the old servant who one day slipped tortillas into her chest, left the Rendon house and went to live with them, to help with the girl, because she said she wanted to spend her last years in a house where affection could be seen. One afternoon, watching the girl sleep, Marisol told Sal what she had spent months not daring to say. "It took me 9 years to realize that true love makes no noise. Forgive me for not having seen you when I should have." Sal took her hand, quiet as always, and at last answered, "You weren't late. You arrived just in time. I would have waited for you my whole life. Sometimes God puts the exact people on our road, not when we deserve them, but when we most need them. And many times they turn out to be the ones we once left behind. Sometimes the quietest man, the one no one takes into account, the one who seems of little consequence, guards in silence the greatness that the boastful only pretend to have. And sometimes to return to the place from which we once fled is not a failure, but the road back home. Who appeared in your life right when no one was looking at you anymore, and turned out to be the one who loved you most? If this story touched your heart, leave me your comment and tell me from where you're joining us. Give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to remember that true love sometimes waits in silence, without making noise, for as long as it takes. And that night, rocking the cradle of the girl that life had given her, Sale whispered softly to Marisol something she would keep forever. This house was always yours. You just took a while to come back.